Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I've missed the last couple of weeks, and so getting back into the swing of things this week. A couple weeks ago, we were sick, went through the whole house, so I missed that. And last week, just kind of getting back into the swing of things. Denise was out of town, and everything was kind of upside down a little bit, so forgot. But back this week, all is well. I hope you're doing well. I do have my cup of coffee, although right now, with the heat outside by this time of morning, it is it's a little warm, so don't know how much more this mid-morning coffee with the heat outside I'm going to keep drinking. Some people used to say if you drink hot coffee, it makes you cooler. I've never had that experience. I do like my coffee, though, so I'm just going to finish this little bit with you today and go about all that I have before me. With the heat, I've been thinking about, maybe you have been too, wishing for cooler times. And one of the times that typically we associate with cool temperatures is the holidays, Christmas. And so I thought Christmas in July was a fair topic for today. Just been looking at the book of Matthew for a couple things lately. And it's actually Christmas in June, July. Thought about it a few weeks ago on Sunday. It was Sunday, June 25th. I'm like, 6 months from Christmas Day. And then sometimes summer sales and different things go on, and they call them like Christmas in July. So I've been reading not so much about sales, although I'm sure there are some big ones going on here and there, but the Christmas story. And it is remarkable how familiar these images are, but how much there is in these familiar stories that can challenge us. The one that I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about today is found in Matthew chapter 2. It's the story of the wise men, or the Magi, who come to visit Jesus. It's actually a fascinating thing to think about this group of people. One of the things we know, it just says in the scriptures, they're Magi from the east, or wise men from the east. What does that mean? Well, those who think about such things, we're thinking about this group probably from what was at the time the Persian kingdom, maybe over toward modern day Iran, maybe as far away as Baghdad or Babylon even, which would have been 500, potentially 700, 800 miles away from Bethlehem. They were a long way, not just physically by distance, but culturally. We're talking about an entirely different religious system, an entirely different culture that certainly all the ancient Near Eastern cultures shared some similarities, whether it's Persians or Jews or whatever, but they are remarkably different, particularly, and what separated the people of Israel from the other cultures was the uniqueness of their God, who revealed himself to them. And Christmas is another one of those times where God reveals himself to us. In fact, my favorite name for Jesus is found in the Christmas story in Matthew. He is called Emmanuel, God with us. And that's part of the beauty of the story of Christmas, that God came near in the flesh, in the person of Jesus. The second person of the Trinity became a human being. And so we have these Magi from the east, these Persian wise men, probably in the realm of upper class, probably very learned, educated individuals. And again, far removed from the history, from the culture of Israel. Now, there's some overlap between the Persian kingdom and Israel, because at one time, Persians came in and they took Israel into captivity, into exile. So we've got those connections historically for 600 years before these events. So it's not like they're totally separate, but they are much different, particularly as it relates to their religious faith. And what we find these particularly Magi doing, apparently, is looking at the stars, because it was, after all, a star that caught their attention. Call them astrologers, astronomers, some hybrid of those two, sort of astronomy being the more scientific side, astrology being the more, you might say, mystic side of the movements of the stars and planets in the sky that throughout history humans have tracked and tried to find meaning from. Well, these particular astrologers, astronomers, wise men, Magi were watching, and they were struck by a particular star, and they were so struck by it that they started a journey to get closer to find out what was going on. See, they understood that it meant something pretty significant. In fact, they come into Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, where King Herod was, and they ask that they've seen this star. They want to know, where is the one born King of the Jews? Because we've seen his star and we've come to worship him. So they looked at this heavenly star, this whatever it was. There are various theories about what it could have been, but whatever it was, it caught their attention, and they discerned in it that God was doing something unique, new, and special, and they wanted to make sure that they could see it, that they were a part of it, that they were going to leave where they were to go find out more about this particular constellation or star that they saw in the sky. And that's pretty remarkable. I think it reminds us, as we've been looking at Hebrews in Sunday morning, as we're going through there in chapter 4 now, one of the messages that begins that whole book of Hebrews is that God is speaking. He's spoken in the past in various times through prophets and all these sorts of things. And then ultimately he speaks through Jesus. So what we see in the Christmas story is that the wise men, the Magi, understood this sign to be a sign from God, to be God speaking to them. And they took from where they were and traveled a great distance, probably for weeks. It's not like you hop a flight from one place to the other. You do it on foot or probably with camels and through a caravan to come from where they were 500, 600, 700, 800 miles away to make that long journey, part of it across the desert to get to Jerusalem, the capital city of Israel, to ask eventually of the king where this star was pointing, because the star seems to have disappeared until they see it again when they find out the one that was to be born is to be born in Bethlehem according to the Hebrew Scriptures, Micah chapter 5, and they point them that way and they go. And it's a remarkable thing. They go and they worship Jesus and they bring gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now that, by the way, is probably why we often say 3 wise men, or in the Christmas hymn, we 3 kings, is because there were 3 gifts. But there's no telling how many wise men there were. We just know it's more than one. That's all that we can discern from this. And they likely, even if it was 3, didn't travel as only 3. They probably had, as people of standing and wealth and position, a whole caravan of support with them, people to take care of them, to travel with them. It would have been quite the procession. It would have been an undeniable presence in the city of Jerusalem when this group came in. And it would have particularly been a spectacle when they made their way just outside of Jerusalem to the little city of Bethlehem. Everybody in town would have known something's up when they saw that group with all the trappings of their wealth and power come to pay a visit to the lowly parents of Jesus, Mary and Joseph. It was quite a scene. So here's my point. Here's where I want to go. And here's what I think where the Christmas story is instructive to us. First of all, you've heard me say, it reminds us that God is seeking to reveal himself. Hebrews talks about God speaks. Why does God speak? How does God speak? God speaks in various ways and ultimately finally through Jesus, but he speaks to reveal himself. He's trying to let us as human beings made in his image know that he is there, that he cares for us, and he's seeking to draw us in, to show us more about himself, and ultimately to point us to the salvation he offers through Jesus. That's why God speaks, to call to us and to bring us to himself. The question that the activity and the visit of the Magi cause me to ask isn't, does God speak? But it's instead asking, am I listening? The only reason they got up and left their home and traveled that great distance is because they saw something, they understood the message was from God, and they began to act, to get closer, to learn more about him. I would suggest to you, God is always speaking around us. Oh, it might not be in the stars, probably not in a star like that. That was a very unique circumstance back at the birth of Jesus. But God is speaking to you in many ways. And I would say that's especially true if you feel like he's so far away. Sometimes we feel like God is 1,000,000 miles away, not just 500 to 700 miles, that there's this impossible distance between us. And I would suggest to you, it's in those times, if we would look, if we would listen, if we would pay attention like the Magi did to the stars and the circumstances, we would see God speaking. It might be through simply the kindness of someone who's a Christian. Might be through someone that you know that is a follower of God through Jesus and does something or says something or offers help in some way. That's one way sometimes God speaks to us, to let us know he's there and he sees us and he understands and he cares. Sometimes it's through circumstance, we call it, that unexplainable coincidence begins to happen. Different circumstances seem to come together in a way that deal specifically with something we needed or a problem we have, and we can't explain how it happened. We don't know what happened. We just know here was an issue and some things happened that we can't explain, and now I've got my answer. You can call that coincidence. Probably most people do. I think the better picture of it is God's providence, his activity in the affairs of human beings. Why? To show that he's there and that he cares and he wants to have that relationship with us. All of those things. And there are so many more ways God might be speaking to you. Certainly when you pick up the Bible, the scriptures, God speaks through this historical account of how he's acted in history. That's kind of the obvious way, but sometimes it's the places we really have to be looking. We have to be paying attention. I think God is probably speaking to every one of you right now. The question isn't, has God forgotten you and has he stopped talking? The question is, are we paying attention to the way God is speaking to us? Maybe it's through this little Facebook video right now, this little coffee with PC chat we're having. And if that's the case, I encourage you, like the wise men, when they understood there was a message and they saw it had something to do with God, they took action. They responded. They acted in a way so that they could be a part of what God was calling them to. So God speaks, yes, but then once he speaks and once we recognize it, then our responsibility is to move toward it. Maybe that involves finding yourself a local church. If you're in the Keys, we'd love to have you come at Key Largo First Baptist Church here, mile marker 99, 9 a.m. on Sundays. Love to have you join us, but it doesn't have to be here. There are lots of good churches in our neighborhood and around the world, wherever you might find yourself. Find a church and you'll be able to meet people who know God, and through them and through worship times together and other activities of the church, that's one way you can respond to God speaking and continue to hear him speaking as he calls you to himself. That's my encouragement for today. I believe God is speaking. I believe God is constantly trying to draw us as humans to himself. The bigger question is, will we pay close enough attention to hear? And when we hear, will we respond? Because God demonstrates his love for us, that he sent his son Jesus, who died for our sins, that whosoever believes in him, the Bible says, will not perish but have everlasting life. God is calling you to himself. Will you listen? Will you answer? If you want to know more about that, if you have any questions for me about what that means or how you can know God in your life, I'd love to hear from you. You can just drop a comment on this video, however you're watching it. We put it out in a few places. Love to hear from you. And call the church office or email me. All that information is on our church website, fbckl.com. First Baptist Church, Key Largo, fbckl.com. Love to hear from you. Love to have a chance to talk with you about how you can come to know the God who speaks and who loved you enough to send Jesus. Hope to hear from you. Love to see you in worship. We'll be here 9 a.m. on Sunday. If you can make it, we'll save you a seat. So until then, have a great rest of your week. Try to stay cool in this heat, and we look forward to getting together with you soon.